Hello, everyone, and welcome to Climate Conversations. I'm your host, Kathy Yang, and today I'm joined by Dr. Hussam Mahmoud. Dr. Mahmoud specializes in sustainable and resilient infrastructure, natural hazards, and community resilience. He is the Craig E. Phillip Endowed Chair of Engineering, Professor of Civil and Environmental Engineering, and Director of the Vanderbilt Center for Sustainability, Energy, and Climate at Vanderbilt University. He is also the advisor and has advised organizations including the World Bank and the United Nations. His research was also featured on outlets including CNN, Smithsonian, New York Times, and more. He's also currently a Nat Geo explorer. Would you like to add anything to your bio?
Oh, thank you. That's great.
All right, so what inspired your interest in your current career on infrastructure and community resilience and the work you do with wildfires?
Sure. Um, so I am a very curious person by nature. I am trained as a structural engineer.
Mm-hmm.
This is my training. So my PhD was at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign, and it was on seismic behavior of steel frames, how steel frames behave under earthquakes. And the first paper I wrote after my PhD was doing as I was finishing up my PhD was on premature birth and why we need to understand the interaction between the uterus and the cervix if we want to prevent premature birth. And I remember my advisor back then, I wrote the paper and he looked at me and he said, "What the heck is this?" Because it has nothing to do with my PhD topic. So my brain kind of likes to wander around. I've kind of it's always been the case. And when I was at Colorado State back in I started in 2011. At one point, I was at Colorado State University and I was working on how extreme events impact the built environment. And then 2015, we received very large grant from the National Institute of Standards and Technology on developing the science for community resilience planning.
Mm-hmm.
And which means how do communities recover from extreme events? And recovery doesn't mean repairing the infrastructure. It means social recovery and economic recovery and physical infrastructure. And I thought that was a very, very cool topic because it's very complicated and complex. So I kind of built on my previous knowledge of how the built environment behaves under extreme events, and I started to look at how infrastructure and social and economic and ecological systems interact during recovery from natural hazards. And so since then, we've been working in this area. And you did mention wildfire. Wildfires happen to be one of the areas we were looking at all hazards, but wildfires specifically, we kind of locked out to some good extent because there were no models that can allow us to understand how um, buildings will be damaged in a wildfire event. So we developed a model, and that model worked really well. And we kind of used that as a model to determine damage. And now we're looking at the recovery process from wildfires.
Wow, interesting story, like from your PhD experience. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, you talked about like the different aspects, like economic, social, and more. And you actually participated in the writing, helping write the Smithsonian guide. You were featured in it as an expert for the climate resilience like program. I saw your work from there. Could you introduce us to some of your projects or your current project with National Geographic?
Cool. You seem to have done your homework. Some of the stuff I did in the past. Uh, yes, as I mentioned, one of the things that we're very interested in is how different ecological system and social and economic system and even physical system recover from natural hazards. And some of the complex systems, and I'll mention two examples that you refer to. One of the complex systems that we try to understand is healthcare systems. And healthcare is too complex because I'm not just trying to repair the hospital, I am trying to recover the healthcare. So, in a hospital, the physical structure is very important, but I also have to figure out um, the nurses. Are they available? Can they get to work? Are their homes damaged or not? Is the transportation network functioning? I need to figure out also the doctors, and I need to figure out, do I have supplies? What type of supplies do I need? Well, the type of supplies will depend on the injury that I'm dealing with. So
Mm-hmm.
injuries from, hopefully not, but injuries from an earthquake is not the same as injuries from burn, from wildfires. They're different, right? They require different supplies. So for a hospital to operate, it's a very complicated, what we call socio-physical system, right? And then that's just one hospital. I have to figure out how to model that. Now we need to consider an ensemble of hospitals that are interacting together because typically they have agreement to transfer patients and transfer supplies and transfer medical records
Mm-hmm.
and doctors and nurses. And so that interaction, if we're able to capture that, then we truly can predict how the entire healthcare system can behave, not just one single hospital. This is some of the work that we've been doing, and it's been very exciting because it takes you away from just thinking one single building
Mm-hmm.
to thinking, systems. And actually, one hospital is a complex system by itself. But if you look at a bunch of them, it's now system of systems. So it's really, really complex. So that's one of the things we've been doing quite a bit on. And now if you have a model like that, you can actually evaluate if that model is working and how it behaves. Can you predict the recovery of the healthcare systems when you're dealing with COVID-19 pandemic, for example? So we model the pandemic and how it spreads and what is the demand on the hospitals. And then we model COVID coupled with wildfires. And we look at healthcare systems under earthquakes and so on. That's one of the things we're working on. The other thing I'm working on is looking at watersheds from a wildfire perspective. And you mentioned the National Geographic project.
Mm-hmm.
That project deals with trying to understand, can we use riparian systems
Mm-hmm.
and watersheds as a nature-based solutions to mitigate the impact of wildfire. So if I want to slow down the fire propagation or alter the fire path, can I restore these riparian systems or watersheds that will help me slow down the fire propagation and change the behavior of the fire? So there's more to it than that, but that's kind of in a nutshell some of the stuff we're working on with the wildfire and looking at the riparian systems and nature-based solutions.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Um, just looking at how like riparian systems can act as fire breaks and prevention. Yeah, that's really cool. I never thought of that really. So, what are, in your opinion or in your expertise, what are the biggest challenges towards creating more resilient communities or modeling healthcare systems or any challenge that you guys have faced?
Mhm. Yeah, that's a great question. So I think in general,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of the topic, there's generally speaking, there's disconnect between what researchers work on from a research perspective and what is being applied in reality for mitigations or solutions. There's actually a large disconnect in general.
Oh,
There's fancy work and research and hospitals are system of systems and this and that, but is that what's being used in reality? In reality, no. Why? It takes much more than developing a really cool model to connect with the stakeholders, to have the interest from the stakeholders, to have a funding agency that is willing to say, okay, well, this sounds really interesting. I'm going to pour a lot of money into it and
mm-hmm.
see, can you guys translate the research into practical applications and implementation? And we're working on some of that for obviously the healthcare stuff. But for the wildfire stuff, uh, there has also been, to some extent, a disconnect but things are changing a lot for the wildfire. So we are lucky enough to be funded by many agencies for our
Hmm.
wildfire work. And we're also even more lucky to have the opportunity to work with many communities. So we're working with about 45 to 50 communities across the country, which is really cool. And even more cool than that is we're getting the buy-in from the community, from the residents, from the fire agencies and firefighters, from the NGOs in the community. And we're saying they're helping us collect the data. Even the residents, homeowners are
Oh.
collecting data because they know we're doing the models. And then we're saying, here are the optimal mitigations to lower the impact of the fire. And now the communities are raising the money to implement these mitigations. And I have not seen um, in my career, or many years now, I'm getting
Mhm.
old, but I have not seen that type of engagement from research to NGOs to stakeholders to communities back and forth, and then really quickly pushing for implementation. It's been an incredible experience so far, and I wish that happens. Maybe it does happen in other fields and other areas, but I wish it would happen more, at least within civil engineering, right? Which is my main field in general.
Hmm.
But we need more of it, and I think I can say for the wildfire stuff, it's happening. I will have to. Mention a huge part of this, and this is just being honest. As researchers, we're really good at developing models. We're
Hmm.
horrible at communicating our work and talking to stakeholders and NGOs, right? Uh, Through some of my fundings and collaboration, I've been lucky enough to engage with different philanthropists and the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation, the Colorado River and Sustainability Campaign, the Roaring Fork Valley Wildfire Collaborative, and they're kind of pulling me. It doesn't take much to pull me, but they're kind of holding my hand and say, "Hey, talk to this. Hey, these communities need help.
Hmm.
Hey, work with this." They made it very easy for me, right? Otherwise, it would have been complicated.
Hmm. So getting to connect with communities, you mentioned how residents help collect data. I think that's really cool. Like citizen science, it's like much easier if people at the location all just come together and work towards this. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually had a really cool experience. I
Hmm.
presented my wildfire work at a fire station in the middle of nowhere a few
Oh.
times, and that was an amazing experience because the residents come to the
Hmm.
to the fire station. They want to learn about aside from being curious about my very thick accent, they also are very curious about the work that is happening. They get very excited. I can tell they're listening, um, and they're very into it. So, which is really, really exciting because then it makes you feel that what you're doing matters to other people, right?
Yeah, wow, that's awesome.
Mhm.
Um, so I guess on the flip side of challenges, what are some things we should work towards, or some strategies that like communities can implement to increase resilience?
I mean, kind of related to the previous question. I think we communities,
Hmm.
regardless where they're at, they need to embrace complexities and they need to acknowledge all of us. I'm not talking about, people that my community is one of them. We need to acknowledge the fact that we're being challenged too much. There are so many frequent events. There are things that are happening more often now and obviously anyone can look at the data and now it's crazy. It's all over the
Hmm.
droughts that we've never seen before, wildfire occurrences we've never seen before. And we all have to, even extreme heat that sweeps across different parts of the world and so on. We need to acknowledge that our conventional solutions are obviously not working.
Mm.
And can we come up with solutions? 100%. We just need to say this is a complicated problem that requires um, maybe simple solutions, but they have to be developed based on detailed analytics and models and predictive models that are validated that account for all possible uncertainties moving forward without hand waving and saying, yeah, I think this would work. Let's just do that because that is not going to work anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so being able to embrace and welcome new methods, because like you said, old ones might not work anymore.
Mhm.
So I guess lastly, do you have any advice for anyone that's interested in the industries you work in or just in climate resilience in general?
Well, the first advice is send me an email if you're interested.
Hmm.
And the second advice would be um, I think for people who are interested in resilience and climate, it clearly is things are intensifying a little, more than what we're used to, and we are not short on problems. They will keep on coming. We need people. We need younger minds and people who are very excited to learn and contribute. And I'd say, of course, aside from being updated and being familiar with the most important and pressing problems, I think you need to prepare yourself um, from an education perspective uh, so that you know, you can actually have a contribution. It doesn't have to be research, by the way. You could be pushing the policy area. You could put
Hmm.
communication only. You could pushing research only. So it doesn't have to be one, but I think early start is key, and I think it's also important that people acknowledge the fact that uh, this area of climate and resilience is is something that 10 years ago there were debates, whether this exists or not. Now
Hmm.
everybody agrees that we're having major problems.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for an area that requires a lot of people and a lot of minds and it's open for a lot of people to come in, that's definitely one of these areas. Go for it because it's an area that you will always have a job and you'll always have a contribution.
Hmm. Well, thank you so much for your insight and advice, and thank you for joining Climate Conversations. Thank
Thanks.
you.
Thank you. Thank
Bye
you.
bye.